Hi, church. I'm excited to be with you as we continue the journey through the lectionary. This week we are looking at Ephesians chapter 5, verses 8 to 14. As we think about Ephesians, really there is just so much that is unpacked through these 6 chapters. Ephesians, it's often recognized as Paul's writing, Paul's letter to the church of Ephesus while he was in prison. The first 3 chapters really focuses on Paul's teaching about what it means to be in Christ. So you would see a lot of how in Christ this community of faith begins to change and transform, and how this new identity in Christ is being kind of brought forth in Paul's teachings. Verses 4 to 6, which encompasses what we are studying here today, emphasize on, well, how do you live that out? In their society, in a time of Paul and this city of Ephesus, what does it mean to live out as Christ followers who are in Christ? And so I would like to begin by reading for us from the passage that we would be looking at today. Starting from verse 8, it says, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. That is why it is said, 'Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.'" Paul begins describing, using the analogy of light and darkness, to describe how Jesus changed and transformed everything. For you were once in darkness, living like the culture and society, living like everything else. But now you are light in the Lord. That Jesus has changed and transformed you. He draws from earlier passages from Ephesians chapter 2 and describes kind of that transformation. And in verse 4 in chapter 2 says, "But because of his great love, of God's great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved." Being saved by Christ, that sins have been broken down and kind of taken away. This other side is this aliveness in Christ that changes and reorients us, not in the ways of darkness anymore, but in light. As Christ is light, we have become like him. And he continues and says, "Live as children of light." That as Christ has changed and transformed us, we are very different now. We are light. And we bear these things, and this is not an exhaustive list of being goodness and righteousness and living a way that pleases God. This is not an exhaustive list. But these are examples of what it means to live and to embody and to be people of light. I think about this contrast. A couple months ago, we invited a friend over for dinner. Her and her son came. We haven't seen them for many years, so it was nice to catch up together. We were eager to have pizza together because we know we'll have 3 young boys in the house. They would love pizza. They're looking forward to video games. And as the night kind of progresses, all of a sudden, all the lights were shut off and all the power was out. We were in pitch dark in our small condo space. And immediately my wife and I went and we tried to kind of using our phone flashlight, looking for other flashlights and getting the candles out. And I remember that moment when we lit the candle and how this little candle begins to radiate this light that changes and kind of breaks kind of the pitch darkness in our space. Now, all the kids were quite upset. They were lamenting the fact that not so much that there's no light, but they were lamenting the fact that they can't play video games. But we were able to enjoy these fresh hot pizza. Luckily, it was delivered under the candlelight. These little candles that we had, that we kind of spaced apart our condo space, lit up the entire space. There was almost, little hints of darkness, but the light was just so bright in contrast to the darkness that is around. And when Christ is describing this, when Paul is describing that being like light, that this light is kind of breaking out of darkness, that is what he was describing. These light that just kind of has, that darkness has no hold over it because it breaks it. Friends, as you gather today, I want to invite you to ponder with these two words that are from this short passage. When Paul writes, "You are no longer darkness, and now you are to live as Christ." How does these words impact and reveal in your life? What is the no longer that is happening with you? And what is the live as? What is this new way? What is this light of Christ that kind of changes and transforms and kind of brings forth out of the darkness that is around? I once had a conversation with a friend. We were kind of wrestling with candles and kind of how candles are being used. And I once heard a sermon by a pastor who talked about something very similar. That candle is meant to be lit in the dark. It's not meant to be lit during the day when it's bright. But it's the most effective when it is in the dark, because it pierces and breaks out of darkness. So when we think about these words that Paul has written, no longer and live as, what does that look like for you to be that light that breaks out of darkness? In a time and in a space where there is sadness and pain and struggle and hardship and hopelessness, do we embody the light that brings hope, life, love, grace, truth, mercy? What stories, what ways, what characteristics are the way that we live our lives? Paul continues in verse 13 and he says, "But everything exposed by light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light." And he closes off with, possibly taken from a prayer or a hymn of some sort during the time of Paul. And he says, "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." That the calling for the church to recognize that the light of Christ is exposing all that is around them, and that no longer are they sleeping in the darkness, but now they would arise, and that the light of Christ will shine forth all around them. I remember growing up in the Catholic Church. One of my favorite time of the year is actually during Easter. On Easter Saturday, like late at night, our family would gather together and we would go to church. And there would be this incredible light vigil. So what happens is everything is pitch dark, kind of resembling the fact that Christ has died, like the Good Friday aspect of it. But then as the priest and the altar server comes in, they bring this giant white candle that's known as the Christ candle, and they place it, and then they light the Christ candle. This one giant candle began to kind of break the darkness in the entire church. And it's this most incredible moment. And then what happens afterwards is even more incredible. The light taken from this giant white candle is being brought to all the congregants. That from one is lit to the other. And then you see this picture of this whole church, everybody carrying this candle. And it lights up this entire church. This church that is in darkness now is filled with the light of these candles. And it came from Christ's candle. when Paul writes for the people to expose by the light, to bring light forth. It's this light that shines, this almost this missional purpose behind the light, that it continues to spread, continues to move out, it extends and is brought forth to others. Scott McKnight, an author, he wrote a book called One Life. Jesus calls and we follow, and he describes this. He says, we need to shed our unearthly and non-social and idealistic and romantic and uber spiritual vision of God's kingdom and get back to what Jesus meant. By kingdom, Jesus means God's dream society on earth, spreading out from the land of Israel to encompass the whole world. This light is meant to spread. What does that mean? What does that look like? And how are we as a community not only living out the light, but seeing this light begin to spread out from your neighborhood to your city, to your province, to our nation, and to many other nations? What does that look like? As Jesus reminds us, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. Friends, I want us to take time as you gather together as church to ponder, to sit with, the two words and two phrases that I encourage you to sit with, but also how and in what ways is the light of this community beginning to spread to those around us. And if you are meeting in somebody's home or a space that is safe, and if you are able to grab a candle, I also encourage you to maybe sit in the dark for a little bit and light a candle and meditate on Paul's words and see if God is inviting us to respond in any way. It's a very powerful practice. And I hope that you would be challenged, that you would be moved, and that Christ would speak to you in new and fresh ways. God bless, friends.